Tell me more about this visit today. How many different book signings have you been to this week?
Oh,
This week?
I do as many as I can. It's time consuming and I need to be home writing, so I can't go nonstop. So I will do two or three a month or something like that.
Now you mentioned you write a book every month.
Yes, I do. I have written 228 novels and I've been writing since I was 50. And I counted up the month that I'd been writing and divided it into the number of books, and I figured out I'd written one book a month for the last 18 years. But let me hasten to add that some of them were small books. They weren't 400-page novels.
Now, before you became this writer, you also had, you said, two other careers. Tell us about that part of your life. You were
My
teaching.
background? Well, I was a Baptist pastor for 20 years. Some of that time I was also a professor of English. And so I have 26 years as a professor of English at a little liberal arts college called Ouachita Baptist University, right in the middle of Arkansas. And then I started writing when I was a late bloomer, and it's hard getting published, but I hit it just the right time to get this particular kind of book. It's called inspirational fiction, and there were only about four of us writing novels. Now there are 100. So that's what I did next. I started writing novels and getting them published, and then I eventually got enough money from the royalties where I wouldn't have to teach.
Tell us more about inspirational fiction. What does that genre of literature involve?
Well, it's obviously inspirational has some sort of religious connotation, and we're talking about really Christian fiction. And I tell everybody that my books have three elements. They have a romance in them, and they have an adventure. It may be about a war or something like that, and then it has Christian a flavor to it. So that's kiss, kiss, bang, bang, hallelujah, to get the three elements together and keep them balanced. So they have the trick is not to make them a sermon. Nobody wants to read a sermon when they buy a novel. So you have to mute that part of it, but it's still there.
How long does it take you to get going in the morning if you were writing that day?
Well, my one claim to fame probably is that I'm the fastest writer in the world. I write very rapidly. My daughter and I started writing a series of books together, and she's very slow and methodical, an accountant and that kind of person. And we got halfway through the first book, and she fired me and said, "I don't need you." Said, "You go off and I'll write the book." She's very meticulous and very much more careful about backgrounds, and if it says it in her books, it's there. Mine's liable to be something I made up. But I write very fast. Well, as a matter of fact, I dictate all my books on a tape recorder. And then I have a lady type them out, and she gives me the disc, and I can put them in and straighten them up. I'm a very slow, poor typist, but I can talk good.
Now, when you are coming up with characters, where does that inspiration come from?
Well, obviously these are that many novels. They're alike, and you will have villains and heroes. And I take as many from history and from life as I can. And when I write, I'm writing now about George Washington, so I try to make George Washington in my book. I have him saying those things which are on record that he said. And what kind of a man was he? I read half a dozen books. They don't all agree, so you have to make your own judgment. And then I have met people that just are like characters in a book, and I don't have to make up anything. They're just had one that I call Uncle Seedy, that he was a Southern man, and he's a fox hunter and all of that, and I didn't have to do anything except write down what I knew about it. So that's the easy part.
When it comes to coming up with the way to end a book, how do you know when it's time to wrap this one up and do another one?
Well, I don't always, and you can tell by reading some of my books that I didn't know how to wrap it up very well. And it's almost like drop the curtain before the act is over. Very difficult. But what I do, I never start a book until I have a complete outline. And the outline may be 40 pages long. And in chapter 1, this happens. In chapter 2, these things happen. And put dates on them. And so before I ever start a book, I have already made that decision, how it's going to end. And I don't know how other people do that. I had one lady tell me she writes Christian fiction, and I said, how do you get ready to write? I just sit down at a computer and start writing. Without planning, yes. And I read one of her books and I could believe it. But I think you have to plan though. It's like a house. If you were going to build a house, you wouldn't just get out there and start driving nails and you would have a blueprint. And I'm very good at that. So once I get that done, I can say, okay, chapter 1, Henry came into the room and saw that Helen was engaged in a passionate kiss with June. What are you doing? Then I just do that, and then I have to fix it. It's never in good shape, but at least it's there.
Speaking of planning, there are many people out there who are planning to write their first book. What advice do you have for them?
Don't quit your job. It's the first thing. It's hard to get into writing. It's a slow process, except for a few people like Margaret Mitchell and Gone with the Wind or John Grisham and The Client. That doesn't happen very often. It's the same way you learn to write, the same way you would learn to paint. You have to learn certain fundamentals about paint, about texture, about canvas, and I can't do it, but I know that unless you're a natural-born genius like Mozart, perhaps, that just did it, you have to learn the fundamentals. And how do you learn to ride a bicycle? You learn to ride, or at least I learned to ride a bicycle by falling off and then getting up and trying it again. And you learn from your failures as well as your successes. And of course, you find good models, somebody that you think is a fine writer, and how does he do it? And you study that.
You mentioned in your talk with us earlier here that you've had some manuscripts turned down. Talk about, you've had some manuscripts turned down or sent back.
Well, actually, not. I've been very fortunate. My first one was turned down 29 times, and they sent it back and said, "Thank you, we can't use it." But since then, I've only, out of these 228 books, I've only had one book that I haven't been able to find a publisher for, and I think it's a good book, but nobody else thinks that. So but you got to be prepared for that. Be prepared to take the time to learn the fundamentals, just like learning to play the piano. I imagine it's very slow. Any other skill, you have, unless you're a natural-born genius and can just do it, and I'm not. I had to learn by, well, I'd been a professor for years. I read thousands of novels, I guess. I learned how to write by reading good writing, I thought, not more than by taking courses, although there are some good courses that you can take.
But the first one was turned down more than 20 times,
Yes.
So that means you have to be very persistent.
And I was very fortunate to finally get that one. There was one man, his manuscript was turned down over 400 times. And when it was finally published, it stayed on the bestseller, New York Times bestseller list for 3 years. The name of the book was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Riding. I don't have any idea what the book said, but it caught on. But he was turned down 400 times, I think. Now that's persistence.
Some people would say that Americans are not reading like they used to read. What do you think about the changing habits of readers in 2011?
Changing habits.
Of readers.
Oh, sometimes I think readers are born. You either are a reader or you're not a reader, and that can change, but I think it's Americans, I don't think as a whole are readers, perhaps like Europeans. I don't know much about that, but that's what I read. And so changing people is hard in any area, and to make better readers out of them, I don't know how to go about that. All I know is write the books and go to places like this and encourage people to read.
Many of those who are reading on these electronic readers like the Nook or the Kindle. What do you think about the changing habits of readers who don't read the pages but read with a computer or some kind of electronic device?
Some people love machines and some people hate them. Those that hate them, like me, they want the book where they can turn the page down and they'll go back and read the book again, and you've made notes, and books become old friends. That I wouldn't have that sense of friendliness on a machine. But others, and especially young people, you know how they like iPods and anything electronic, they will buy the things and they'll learn to use them. So there'll always be both kinds of readers, I think.
Tell us about God's Warrior. What's the story? Who are the key characters in that book?
The chief character is a young woman who is named Jordan Lee. As the book opens, she's in the military police in Afghanistan. And she's sent out on a mission. She's a sergeant. She's sent out on a mission, and two armored vehicles, and they get pinned down by the Taliban. And the first vehicle gets blown off the road, and her officer is lying there, and she crawls over there under fire and drags him to a place of safety and gets shot. And then she sees the driver and goes back and gets him and gets a wound in the leg. Well, she wins the Silver Star. Well, it's only 3 or 4 women ever won the Silver Star. She becomes pretty famous, plans to make a career out of the military. But her sister dies, she and her husband, in a car wreck, and they have 2 children, and Jordan is the only one to raise them. So she resigns from the Army and goes back. And then the book, part 2 of the book, is her struggles to learn how to be a mom, a single mom, and she doesn't know anything. So I try to put in the book, what are the problems of a single mom today? And of course, I had to talk to single moms to find that out more than I really knew. And then she finds some things in the school system she thinks are not right, and she takes up the cudgel to get them out, and has a real battle to do that. She wins. Then a legislator, a member of the House of Congress, dies, and the governor of the state appoints her to fill the rest of his term. So the rest of the book is a story of her struggle to regain early American virtues. She sees things, and of course she's me, you know. Obviously I write about things that I would like to see change. Jack London was a socialist, so his books are all socialistic dogma. So I wrote the book because I see some things in government that I would like to see changed, as most of us would, I guess. And so she struggles to achieve these goals.
Do you think there's a message about women in the military in this book?
We may be past that because even as we speak, they have already made arrangements to put the first woman on a nuclear sub. Now, it's bad enough to live with 100 hairy-legged men, you know, but for a woman to fit into that, I don't see how it can happen, but that's what they're going to do. And of course, I do mention in the book some of the men don't like that. They don't like women in combat, and I mention that issue. But I say I've come to the conclusion, as most of us have, that there is a place. They can't be a SEAL now. I don't think most men can't be SEAL. So, but aside from that, there's a place.
We're talking to you in May of 2011. What's next for you? What's your next project?
I'm writing just starting a series of books about the American Revolution, in which I want to show the unsung heroes, people that most Americans don't even know about. Like you mentioned, give them a list of people like Henry Knox. Who is he? Well, most people don't know, but he was Washington's favorite general, and he was the one that managed to take Boston by going to Fort Ticonderoga and getting the cannons to take Boston, which was probably Washington only won 2 battles in the whole war, and that was one of them, and really Henry Knox won that one. So I want to do this on a junior high level, and aim at least partially to the homeschool market, where kids can get the real story of the Revolution.
Dr. Gilbert Morris, thank you so much for your time today.
It's so good to be with you. Glad to talk with you.